Good evening, everyone. I'm so sorry for, I would say, breaking transmission. My audio was misbehaving, but thank God I got it fixed. Oh, that's nice. So my name is Alasa Hanat, and I'll be speaking on environmental pollutants and our health. I would like to appreciate the previous speakers. They've been doing, they did a great job, and I hope I'm able to satisfy our thirst for this particular topic. So environmental pollutants, they're actually things we interact with on a daily basis. Some of these pollutants are actually natural occurring, but then they occur in very minimal, quantities that are not harmful to our own health. But then human activities releases more of these chemicals, and then we have interactions of chemicals and then leads to, very harmful effects. So I would say environmental pollutants are actually chemicals that has ended up in our environment as a result of human activities, and then they are harmful. So I would like to divide them into three main groups, which is pollutants that has to do with air, water, and food. And then they get into our system from the skin. The skin is an organ, so they could penetrate through the skin into our system. They could get in through ingestion, probably eating them in food or taking them in water. Then, of course, inhalation, we breathe in those chemicals. So for air, because I like to take them according to the way I've wrote so that we can follow. So for air, we have the popular air pollutants that we interact with ozone, that's O3, nitrogen oxide, carbon monoxide, sulfur dioxide, and of course, particulate matter. For particulate matter, they're actually grouped in sizes. We have PM10, PM5, PM2.5, and like that. But the most common of these common ones are particulate matter and carbon monoxide. For carbon monoxide, it is a gas, and then it is odorless and colorless. And this brings me to the popular definition they give us back then in secondary school when they say, this gas is odorless, colorless, and tasteless. I don't know who tasted it and came up with it being tasteless. So, but then carbon monoxide is a colorless gas. It is odorless, but it is highly toxic when it interferes with our system. So for air pollution, or air pollutants rather, it is a little bit difficult to avoid them because they are usually, some of them you don't tell until the gas actually has poisoned you. So you can't say I'll breathe this air or I won't breathe this air and all of that. You can't possibly seal the air you take in. So it is usually very difficult for us to actually avoid them. And they are usually found, carbon monoxide especially, they're usually found in when you burn fossil fuel, and also when you practice open burning, because some of these things you burn, probably household equipment, waste, and all of that, they contain these chemicals that when they are subjected to fire, they are giving off in the air, and then we breathe them in, and they interfere with our health. So also when you talk about generator fumes, the fumes also contains carbon monoxide. And also carbon monoxide is a harmful gas that it has this mechanism of working. It binds with hemoglobin and cuts off oxygen supply to the body. Carbon monoxide has like about 250 times power to bind with hemoglobin than oxygen has to bind with hemoglobin. So then it could lead to asphyxiation and all of that. And then if the person doesn't get help, probably lead to death. So that's for carbon monoxide. And most times when someone is poisoned with carbon monoxide, the best is to take the person out of that environment and then introduce clean oxygen for the person to, take in, then seek medical condition. So then for particulate matter, we have PM2.5 and PM10. Those are quite popular ones. Now PM10, that's particulate matter 10. They are quite bigger compared to 2.5. 2.5, yes, they are smaller. So particulate matter is actually a mixture of solid and liquid. They are not totally solid. They mix with liquid and, occurs in the air. Sometimes the normal air mist, fogs, and all of that contains this PM. So they are usually categorized by size, like I said as big or as small as they are. That's how they are being categorized. For PM10, they are inhalable particles actually, and they are less than or equal to 10 micrometers in diameter. So, and they are present in dust, pollen, molds, and all of that. For PM2.5, they are way smaller, and the particles are finer. So for the PM10, sometimes you can even avoid to breathe them in because you can see them. Unlike the 2.5, they are way finer and smaller, such that they are about 1/30th of air strand. If you know how tiny air strand is, now imagine something way smaller than that. So you can actually not be able to see them. For PM10, even the air in our nostrils can sieve them out. That's why sometimes in very dusty weather, you can, clean your nostrils and you see dust particles that are settled in. Those are the ones that the air in our nostrils are sieved out. But for the PM2.5, they penetrate as deep as the alveoli, like they go deep, tinier than what your air nostrils can sieve. So usually they occur naturally in the air too, like I said, with like air mixture with water and droplets. And they are also caused by urbanization, construction, different movements, vehicular movements, and all of that in our environment. So for air pollutants, we have effects of air pollutants. For air pollutants, we have short-term effects and long-term effects. It is also worthy to mention that noise is also an environmental pollutant, and noise also has its effect on our human hearing system. Some of these particular pollutants, we could get them from workplaces and majorly homes. So for air pollutants, for like noise now, the effect of noise also is there. There is long-term and short-term, that's auditory and non-auditory effects. But let's concentrate on air pollutants now, the effect. So for some of the effects could include aggravated asthma. That's for like the short term, like for someone that already has asthma, if you expose that person to dust or pollen and all of that, it could aggravate the condition. Then we also have irregular heartbeats. We could also have respiratory symptoms. Then for long term, it could lead to asthma, decreased lung function, respiratory infection, and non-fatal heart attack, then eventually death if the person doesn't get help. So how to protect yourself? Minimize outdoor activities, especially in seasons like dry seasons, Harmattan, where you have a lot of dust. If you don't have to go out, don't go out. If you have to go out, you could go out early hours of the day when the sun is not up and particles are not raised all up in the air, or late in the evening when the sun is down and there are lesser particles in the air. Or if you must even go out in this period, you could use a nose mask that can at least sieve out 95% of these particles. So that's how we can protect ourselves from air pollution. And also, you could discourage open burning. You discourage the use of some chemicals that could leave these particles in the air also. So let's go to water and food. For water and food, I'm going to categorize them together because they are more like together. So water and food can be categorized as one, like I said, major food and environmental pollutants. They can also be biological, they can be chemical or physical. Remember that at the beginning of this this session, we were able to establish that some of these pollutants are actually natural occurring. They occur naturally, but then in minimal portions that would not cause harm. But then human activities, releases more, and then the interaction causes harm to us. So for the food and water, for pollutants that get into food and water that causes harm to us can include heavy metals like copper, lead, mercury. They could be microbial. So for heavy metals especially, how they get into food, there's what we call bioaccumulation. This is more like the aquatic, for food, like the aquatic organism taking in some of these chemicals through water and storing in their system, and somehow they find themselves on our plates and we ingest them in, and it starts to affect us. Also, for chemicals like some pesticides, if you're not using organic chemical for pesticides, the residues and all of that get into the crop that is being grown, and then they end up on our tables. That's why we encourage organic farming. So lead is actually, let's talk about lead. Lead is actually a chemical of public health importance because people don't really take it seriously, but the damage it does to the system is huge. Children, pregnant women, they are more at risk. Same thing for air pollutants too. Children and mothers, they are at risk because children, they are the ones that play with things that could bring about this. Even some toys contain some chemicals that children play with, put in their mouth, that can actually cause harm. The same thing also with our mothers who cook with open fire in the rural environments. They are also exposed. But for lead is an environmental toxicant, of course, and it's quite dangerous to our health when consumed. It occurs naturally in the earth crust, and humans are exposed to it either through mining, during manufacturing, or recycling activities, as the case might be. They are found in paints. They are found in jewelry, gasoline, batteries, and the likes. Like in paints, I remember there are some regulations that came up even in advanced country that lead should be stopped to be used. They should stop the usage in the production of these household items because we have children that we know how children can be. Children are quite vulnerable. They could play with the wall, peel, children, anything they pick straight from the wall or whatever to their mouth. We've had issues of lead poisoning via children eating paint and the like. Also, lead can also get to our drinking water via leaded pipes. In those days, the water corporation and all of that, the pipes they use in connecting water from the dam or as the case might be to our houses, they are actually leaded. And this lead can leach into the water and cause harm in our system. So usually the most exposed groups are usually children and of course, pregnant women. So generally we can be exposed to lead either via our occupation or even at home. So lead can be inhaled during production, people that work in manufacturing companies, or even during open burning. Sometimes you burn, some of us, one will have like bad electronic gadgets. We just probably burn them or just throw them away. Unlike in advanced country where they have like sites where they dump such things they don't use. Some of these gadgets are produced with such chemicals like lead. So when you burn them, you smell, the particles goes into the air and anybody can inhale it. Then also, we can also ingest lead, like I said, through our drinking water or children. Some of the gasoline that we use, some of them are still leaded because I'm not sure in this part of this country if the regulations are actually as strict as them testing these items to make sure that they do not contain lead. So then also in aquatic life, like our fishes, we have so many industrial waste that are being dumped into the river. One thing about environmental sanitation, pollution, and all of that is like it's a circle. Sometimes you do it or people do it without knowing that it comes back to them. Let's imagine such companies that dump their effluents in rivers and all of that. They eat. Some of them are even lovers of seafood, but they don't know that these organisms bioaccumulate it and then it gets back into the system, which becomes harmful to even them. So for effects of lead in the system, lead can cause damage to the brain, the liver, the kidney, the bones. In children, it can lead to reduced intelligence, like intelligence coefficients, like they would not be as intelligent as they should be. Then exposure to lead can also cause anemia, especially in pregnant women, renal impairment and all of that. Then also in pregnant women, it leads high level of lead in the system can lead to stillbirth or even miscarriage or even low birth weight. So that's when you have children that you give birth to and they are not normal and you begin to wonder that if the mother used a particular drug or something, it might not be. It could be exposure to some of these chemicals. Also, if you look at our society today, we have a lot of people that are undergoing a lot of health challenges and we begin to wonder, what is our generation doing wrongly? The things we eat are the major problems. Like it is always said that you are what you eat. If you eat healthy, it doesn't mean you wouldn't get sick, but then your body will fight majority of it and you will come down less with ailment and all of that. So for treatment of lead poisoning, it is the first thing is to get away from wherever the lead is coming from, either remove the source of contamination and seek medical attention. But then in treating lead, we have what we call the EDTA chelation therapy or the chelation therapy. For the EDTA chelation therapy, it's mostly used when EDTA is introduced into the system to bind with this lead and it's excreted out of the body. And also the EDTA chelation therapy is is more used for children that cannot tolerate drugs, unlike the chelation therapy that is used for adults. So for lead also, usage of inorganic fertilizers also contains it. So they could get, apart from our water, apart from leaded paint, apart from gasoline, they could also be bioaccumulated in the food that we eat. So let's talk about plastic pollution, which is part of pollution that happens on land. Plastic, I will refer to them as pollutants because if they are not well managed, they actually get into our system and, disrupt a whole lot of things. If you look at the society today, when it comes to packaging, we use plastic products more. Sometime around last year, I think personally, this whole plastic pollution thing got to me that I think I almost took it personal because it was alarming when, apart from the fact that they get into our food and affect our own health, they pollute the environment. They cause other environmental issues like flooding, degradation, and the rest. If you look at plastics today, you will see that most of them are created for one use, like one use. There's no provision for recycling. There's no provision of getting them out of the environment, even though we have people that are responsible for bringing it into the environment, but they don't take responsibility of how they are taken out of the environment. I'm going to come back to that later. Let's talk about how plastic and food relate and can affect our health. So let's look at plastics as pollutants. If you look at our homes today, most of us store our food in plastic containers, either using it in the fridge or using it to microwave our food and all of that. Several studies have been going on, especially with the use of microwave and plastics, that is it possible for these plastics to get into our food through microwaving it. A lot of study has been on, evidences has been going on that actually it is possible for plastics to leach into our food, especially when subjected to heat. Apart from human life, plastic poses real damage to the aquatic lives, which in turn affect us as humans. Because although it takes a lot of time for plastic to degrade, some of them are not degradable. They take hundreds of years. But when they finally degrade, they degrade into our water bodies, into the soil, where we depend on the food we eat. Take, for instance, some of these aquatic animals even swallow these plastic containers, and it leads to their death. Of course, aquatic life matters. What about the ones that do not eventually die? They end up on our tables and we eat them, and then we're affected by it. So I would say that plastic is the most used packaging material, and we do not take cognizance of the effect. We just use it, and a lot of us, we've been encouraged to use the 3R, the reuse, the recycle, but most of us, we don't even practice waste segregation in our homes to make this better, easier for those persons picking up the waste, so that they wouldn't even burn the plastics with the normal regular waste. Now, if plastics are burnt, there are actually some chemicals that are released into the environment. In fact, if they're burning waste and the waste contains plastic, you can perceive that, I think there's a polythene material burning somewhere, and thereby you inhale it, because of course you cannot avoid it. Even if you can quickly get out of that environment, you would have inhaled a particular amount of it. Now, one thing about health issues or things like this is that most of them, we don't come down with those diseases immediately we inhale them. It accumulates, it further progresses, sometimes years upon years. For instance, is like people that have occupational exposures to all of these chemicals and toxicants we've mentioned earlier. Some of them, they might even have retired or do not work in that working place for years before they begin to come down with this sickness. So let's take, for instance, a study was carried out in University of Maine by some scientists, and they wanted to test if the safe bioplastic bags that are being used are actually safe, if they actually penetrate into the food we eat, or then it doesn't penetrate like people would say. So what they did was that they took plastic bags, Teflon bags, glasswares, and got fishes. Then they put these fishes into those bags and allowed them to stay for a period of time. So after 48 hours, a lot of things started, a lot of observation, decided making some observation. So for the group of fishes, the fishes they actually use, they call them, they also use different type of water. They use seawater, and tropical coral fish was the fish they use. The fish is actually not a fish that is consumed. They are all used for beautification and all of that, like in an aquarium and all of that. So they put some in glass bowls, some in Teflon bags, and some fishes were kept in plastic bags. Okay, so for plastic bags, we have some plastic bags, and we have also the non-phenol. Non-phenol is like a chemical that is used in making these bags. So after about 48 hours of the fishes, they actually realized that the fishes that were kept in plastic bags, they contained high concentration of non-phenol. That's the chemical that is used in producing these plastic bags. While they also discovered that short and long-term survival of these fishes decreased. They also noticed that fishes that were kept in polythene plastic bags, they perished by the 8th day, while fishes in controlled treatment like Teflon bags and the glasswares, they actually survived. So there were no observed effects in fishes kept within a bowl or even Teflon bags. So this test alone, like this scientific experiment alone, can prove to us that even while researches are being done to see if actually the fishes, if these plastic bags get into our food, or these plastic materials get into our food, we can prove that actually they get to our food. If you even study it very well, there are some plastics that you put in a microwave and you subject them to a particular level of temperature. You notice that they even melt, even if it was written that those plastic materials are microwavable. So now imagine that for it to melt, some chemicals would have leached into the content of that plate. Also, there were some circulars going around some time ago that if you put bottled water in the car and leave it overnight, it is wrong for you to drink it, because this is actually true. Most of us, we take pure water a lot. Sometimes when we even buy pure water and take pure water, you notice that you begin to feel some kind of taste, and you begin to say, it doesn't feel like it's the water that is the problem. It feels like it's the bag, like the nylon that was used to, package the water, that has a particular smell or taste. So this is like proof that plastic materials actually can leach into our food. Then you now have children who probably take ice cream, chew the nylon out of, being a kid, or drink water, chew the nylon. Some of us then, I can remember back then, my undergraduate days in the hostel, how laziness will push people. They want to boil water. They rather boil the water, the pure water, in a pot with the nylon, then pour it into a cup. That's like introducing chemicals to our own food. Then we begin to come down with liver problems, kidney problems, cancers, and the rest of that. So I would like to, not to take much of the time because we still have another speaker, and of course there will be questions. I'd just like to wrap up by saying that environmental pollutants are actually pollutants that we interact with on a daily. And we can do well to stay away from them, to keep safe, to keep sane. But one thing about environmental protection from pollutants is that you cannot do it alone. You have to advocate others, you have to encourage others, because it doesn't make any sense that you're servicing your gen on a regular to avoid the input of smoke and the rest into the environment, and then you're cleaning your environment and you're doing all of that, and your neighbor is not doing that. We've had instances of people dying in their rooms overnight, and then when the whole autopsy and all of that is carried out, they discover that they've inhaled carbon monoxide over the night, and it has led to their death. The gen might not necessarily belong to the person that died. It might belong to someone else, but then it has affected the person. So you see, environmental advocacy is something that everyone should do. It's not must. You have to be an environmentalist. You don't have to be an environmentalist for you to preach environmental health to people, because what goes around comes around. Imagine issues of people disposing waste, toxic waste into the river, and then it's coming back to everybody, including the persons that dispose it. So I'll just say, let's take this home, that we should encourage people to live well, environmental cleanliness, stop open burning, encourage planting of trees. You know, God has blessed us as a nation, as a group. We actually have, nature has a way of recycling itself, but it is just our human activities that gives nature more than what it can take. The trees around us, they help to filter the air, but what do? Urbanization, we cut down these trees without necessarily planting another one. Then the trees are supposed to take in the waste that we have put to the environment and give us fresh air. The trees are no longer there to purify the air for us. So I'll just encourage us to practice, safe burning. If you have to burn, it should be in an enclosed environment whereby the particles don't get to people and then cause harm to them in return. So I'd like to take questions too. If you have questions, you could drop them on the chat session. So I'll just go ahead to check. So I think I have a question already. Which material would you suggest one eats from? Stainless, ceramic, etc. Most times, even the use of this plastic, it's not like some of these plastics are actually so bad that if we eat from them, the food content already would have been contaminated from the plastic material. It's not always like that. Most times it's when they are subjected to adverse or harsh conditions like heat and all of that. So I would say ceramic is fine. So far, so good. I think stainless is fine, even though metals too. Stainless are produced with metals, aluminum, and the rest too. So there are actually possibilities that these metals could leach into our food. But then I think ceramic is fine. But then if you must put food in microwaves, probably cover properly, use ceramics and not plastic. So I think I've answered that question already. So if we have another question, I would like to take it as fast as possible. But if we don't, or if questions come up later, we could drop them, drop the questions, and I would attend to them. So I think I'm done with this session, and I hope I was able to do justice to the topic. Okay, I think another question.
You have one more question, yeah.
Can we eat from nylon, especially hot food like puff puff? Actually, I would say street food also, like I said, in Nigeria, most of our packaging materials are plastic-based. It is actually wrong to eat from nylon, especially puff puff. If you look at it very well, sometimes when the puff puff is very hot, when you put it in the bag, it already melts. If you even take the nylon clothes and smell, you begin to smell these polythene materials that are used in production of these plastic bags. So I would say it is not safe to eat in nylons. But I'm actually glad today that in the food industry, some persons have started progressing to packing food in more good containers that are not. We actually have biodegradable packaging materials. It's just that they are a little bit expensive. But if the government can actually come in, it will go a long way, because trust me, it's going to reduce the level of health problems we have in our country. So I think we should actually stay away from eating from plastic materials, especially hot food. So I think another question just dropped. What about paper-based packages? Paper-based packages are actually way better, because paper, they are recyclable, they are from plants, like one of our speakers was talking the other time, talking about plant-based food and all of that. Paper is plant-based, it's gotten from tree, so it cannot affect us like the plastic material. So somebody said, any plastic recycling company in Nigeria? Of course, we have a couple of plastic recycling companies in Nigeria. We even have some environmentalists that are collaborating with these people. If you even look at it very well, there are some people in our area that goes about picking plastics. Now, we're not talking about those that go about picking plastics to use it to produce something else, probably like this normal street food, the kunu, the zobo. These are ways that pollutants even get into us. Because if you look at it, some of them even go to hospitals where you have patients that are sick or suffering from one disease, contagious, something that you can even transmit to someone. Some of these patients will probably spit into these plastic containers or wee into it. And this, street vendors just picks it up and washes it and uses it like that. Those are ways that contaminants get into our systems. So I would advise that we stay away from every form of environmental contaminant such. Then if, like it was advised, regular checkups and the rest of them, advocacy. It's not something one person can do alone, because if you're doing it right and the other person is not doing it right, it still comes back all wrong. So I think I've been able to answer all the questions. I don't think there's any question, except we want to wait for another 1 minute if we have any question drop. But if not, I think I've come to the end of